I was born an Army brat. My father was an Army brat. As an child who was raised in the military. Okay. My father was in the Army. I was born in Kentucky, and we moved all over the United States. I went to high school in Hawaii. Pretty nondescript kind of military life. And religiously, we went to church for Easter. My mother made us go for Easter, and I liked being in church. I liked it. I've always believed in God and praying, but not really a hardcore religious background. And then I went to college at University of Connecticut and transferred to Washington State, and that's where I got exposed to Islam. But other than that, my formative years were both basically spent all over the States, going to public school. Pretty happy. I'm the oldest of three. A brother and a sister younger than me, and I'm the only Muslim in the family. I actually did find I think he's a fourth cousin who is a Muslim. And I've just heard it from another cousin who does the genealogy, and I've talked to him on the phone once, so we just keep missing communications. But that's the only one. I am the only one. Although I did find out DNA-wise, my father had his DNA done by Howard University to find out in terms of where Africa he came from. And on the X chromosome, it showed up Mende and Medinka, who were both Muslim people. And I've often wondered if, my conversion is kind of like a prayer from centuries ago, where they just said, please don't let this die here. 14 through 18, and then after a divorce, I moved back there for another 3 years. Stayed with my parents. Yeah, I think just the matter of moving, just moving everywhere, getting a different feel, because America is really like different types of countries, different places. But Hawaii, definitely, I got a sense of different people, because it's a lot of Asian culture. I took Japanese in high school, and I was the only black person there, but I aced it, I loved it. So we got a lot of the Japanese culture, a lot of Asian culture, which is the majority, Then we had Hawaiian culture, the Tongans, the Fijians. But I've always just been fascinated by different people. I like meeting different people, learning different cultures, hanging out. So I think a military, as a rule, I would say military kids who travel, they can do that. They can kind of, now in terms of worldview and news, we're just as ignorant as what we see. A lot of things I used to think about other places, like coming here to Canada for the first time, I thought my stereotype was from that show, Little Mosque on the Prairie. And Sarah just like, that's in Saskatchewan. I said, I don't know Saskatchewan. I don't know what that means. But you pick it up. And I definitely always believed in God. I prayed for my sister. It was me and my brother for the longest, and I just would pray for a sister who came 10 years later. And then I remember my favorite fruit is an apple. And I remember just contemplating, after eating an apple, looking at the seed and just saying, wow, this little seed grows into a tree that I can climb and get shade from, and it makes, a fruit that actually tastes good to me and is good for me. And I was just blown away by that. So I always had, always been kind of spiritual on that level. But church-wise, I didn't know anything. I thought Easter, if Christmas was Jesus' birthday, I thought Easter was God's birthday. And I missed it somehow. But I liked going to Easter services because I just liked the vibe. It was a holy time, and people were, they were opening up for what they knew as God. But in terms of being a Christian, and we only went for Easter. We celebrated Christmas, but our atheist neighbors celebrated Christmas. It wasn't, but that's it. And it turned out, I think, to be a blessing, because I didn't have to unlearn anything. So when Islam came, yes, there's a God, and this is how you were led, and this is just as valid as anything else. Things have changed from what, in the 60s and 70s, I was not always like the good girl. I was wild, and we snuck around and did things we weren't supposed to do, going to the movies, where we disobeying. We did the mischievous kind of children things. But there was a sense of protocol. You called people's neighbors' parents by Mrs. So-and-so. There's certain things you didn't do. You obeyed the teacher. You obeyed your parents. You did what you had to do. There was regiment. I think my father being military, I think having that regiment. But everybody was like that, and I really, alhamdulillah, I thank God that we had a really close-knit extended family. Thanksgiving we were up to grandparents, And it was just that love and that companionship, and I always felt, you know, loved and respected and special, so all of us did. So that makes you act right anyway, or act better, proper. So yeah, they did. I think they raised me. First I went to college at University of Connecticut. And I did meet a Muslim African, I think she was with the Nation of Islam. She was very eccentric. She wore a turban and smoked a pipe. But she was I don't remember our conversation. She was just herself, and it was, that's who I am, and deal with it. And they said, oh, she's Muslim. And that's, nobody really talked bad about her, but that she's the Muslim, you know, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Washington State was where I found it, because in fact it was about 1979, 1980,
Okay.
and the Iranian Revolution erupted.
Yeah.
So it was all on the news.
Okay.
All of the, I also met a sister named Asma, African-American woman, and she was older than me, and for some reason she took me under her wing. And she was a real health food nut. She started showing me about sugar, gave me the book Sugar Blues. And she said, well, come with me, you know, and they were having the new MSA was starting up. So she brought me to the Sisters and Muslim Students Association. And I don't know if it was starting, but it was really growing because Islam was now topical. And Muslims was coming out the woodwork. And most of them college students and married college students. So she took me to the Sisters meetings. And that's where I was like blown away with this new group of culture. You know, we had people from Nigeria and Malaysia, Indonesia, Iraq, Iran, Libya, Tunisia, Afghanistan. I mean, the whole gamut. Everybody got along. Everybody was idealistic. Everybody was working together. We didn't have a place of worship. Everybody prayed together, the Sunnis, the Shias. I mean, it was, and so when people became Muslim at that time, they took you under their wing. They visited you, brought you home. I mean, they really adopted you and made sure you were straight. Versus now, and I see how it's really changed. A lot of people take the Shahada, everybody congratulates them, pats them on the back, and basically, okay, see you next Friday.
Yeah.
And they get pulled back sometimes. But it was really, at that time is when I first found Muslims through Asma. Washington State is a really small town. Pullman, Washington. It's the pit, really. And a lot of people were just from there. They were she was from back east. I had lived back east. So she could tell that I had a little more, I was broader knowledge about the world and politics. Apartheid was going on. I was going to meetings. And I wasn't kind of in this small mentality. So we started out conversating like that. And she just, I think that's basically what it was. Oh, I also left that apart. My boyfriend was Muslim. He used to be nation, pseudo, and then when the thing erupted, he became kind of a Sunni. But Asma was actually more, she was more orthodox. She knew Malcolm X, actually, so she came in, she was more orthodox by then, but she kind of took me under her wing in terms of dawah, you know. The brother finally did, but he was kind of learning himself, you know, at the same time. But like I said, the vibe was just incredible. I mean, people who never did become Muslim, they were just wide open. We had Muslim conventions, we had Muslims learn about Islam. People were flocking to the booths. A lot of stuff going on about Palestine. They were listening, you know, people were coming with speeches. Apartheid was going on, and then we were looking on TV every night, you know, the Iranians dealing with the Shah and the CIA and all that stuff. And I think being in that time, people were actually kind of on their side. Say, all right, you know, these students, they're dealing with this. They're getting rid of the oppression. So it wasn't like it is now, where Iran is like the boogeyman. And then when I started going to the meetings, it was just actually what they taught me about Islam. Because it's hindsight, too. When I was thinking about the apple, it just dawned on me one day. I said, you know what? All these religions seem to have the main thing, you know, God, rules, how to act, you know, worship me. What if it's just one God, and these messengers come down, but people keep messing it up? You know, they keep changing it after he dies. So when they told me Islam, that's basically what it said. You know, one God, 124,000 prophets. The book gets changed, the message gets changed, it keeps coming down, 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 and then here's the last one. So it was like, okay, this makes a whole lot of sense. So I just started paying attention and learning, and everything I heard was just clicking. Yeah, it was within the year. And I was going to conferences, and the sisters would ask, when are you going to take the Shahada? And the one hang-up, of course, was, and even though I didn't go to church, it somehow got in my head that unless you take Jesus Christ as your Savior, you are doomed. So I really had to study that, and they showed me a Quran. I said, okay, explain it to me again. And then, I can't remember the ending argument, but it finally dawned on me. Jesus was a man. He was a perfect man. He was a great prophet, but he wasn't God. And once I got through that, and I was able to take the Shahada. And one good thing, I was in college. One thing I liked about these people, and I became Sunni. They didn't push me. I was 22, and because I was dealing with people who had come from the Nation of Islam, and people who were of Deen, and then the Orthodox Sunni, and then you could see the people dressed different ways, they would tell me, okay, there's an American hijab, there's a Pakistani hijab, you don't have to look like an Arab, you don't have to do this. And I was just, basically vain too. I got to put all that on to worship God. So other than praying and coming to stuff, when I would come with my little gele and my little, I'd put something more. Nobody confronted me with, your prayer's not accepted, you're not going to be able to, they really just took me as I was, worked with me, gave me a scar slowly, slowly, slowly. In fact, with one sister tried to do that, I was busy praying, and she just almost grabbed me by the collar. Don't you know? And they grabbed her and said, leave her alone, get away. Just leave her alone. They said, don't worry about her. And in time, I think that would have turned me off at a certain juncture, but it didn't, because they didn't do it. And they let me come at my pace. And just, it was like, I'm Muslim now. First, it was a progression, because I stopped eating pork. So I told them, don't eat pork. And if I had stopped eating pork at UConn, because I met some black Israelis, and they had got me off the pork. So then it was pork. And I was always the weird kid. I had got involved with Scientology. So Mom and Dad, I'm Muslim now, okay, whatever. Yeah, it's like whatever. Jackie's a Muslim now, okay, we'll see. And they didn't really know. So I don't think, and then at UConn, let's see, this at Washington State. And I'm thinking that was the last time I went home. By the time I converted, I was on my own. I wasn't going home for breaks. I was working. I was graduating and started working. So then when they saw me again, I got married to Tariq, and they saw me again. I was Muslim. I'm forgetting the order, but it was what it was. Because eventually I did move back home with them with a son, and was Muslim, and hooked up with the community there, the small community there. But they were respectful. They didn't want me to wear the full hijab. I was trying to experiment at that time. I was like, no, that's too much. Just wear it the way you used to wear it. And they didn't give my child pork. And they asked a few questions, but mostly it was like, just do what you're going to do. Let's not talk about religion, but that's fine. Whatever you're going to do, it's okay. I was Sunni for 10 years, and I don't question too many things that people tell me. Okay. I was learning, I was learning stuff, but I was getting really tired every time we had a speaker and he spoke to the Americans. They'd have a separate thing for the Americans. He was telling us how to bathe and how to wash. That was big. They have another topic in Arabic, and it's like, we're not stupid, just please. And a little bit of books that we had, they just weren't catering to us to really get more into it. But again, we had a lot of people who were married to Iranians. They were Shia, they were whatever. And I do remember as the Moroccan War started, they started to kind of pushing the Iranians out of the boards. They wouldn't let, just slightly, they wouldn't let the women bring in Majouba magazine. They said it was political. The Iraqis was having problems. So it was a slowly thing where Shiism, I began to pick up something was wrong with the Shias. Something was wrong with the Shias. The Shiites at that time. Yeah, they're not really Muslims, the Shiites. And I never really said that. I just knew something was wrong. Although the Iranian sisters, this one sister, Zita, I'm still looking for her. I would love to contact Zita Kargar. I would love to contact with her, but she was Iranian, and she went to black study classes. She was one of those really strong Muslims, and a real Muslim. She wasn't into culture stuff or anything like that. But they were involved, so I saw there were Shias, and then time went on. Then when I got married to Tart, we moved to University of, I went to University of Arizona, he went to work there, and I went to graduate school for a little bit, and that's where it was really a division of the Sunni and the Shia, and they were telling me all this stuff, and that's, we had our little classes, and, you know, I mean, they were saying some ridiculous stuff. We have the other Quran, they curse the companions, they're wrong. And no, of course, when the Iran thing was going on, it's those Shias. They're making a bad name for the Muslims. Okay, so that it all came to things. So one thing I remember that really hurt, hindsight, I wish I knew who this sister was. We were going somewhere, and there was a Muslim sister that came by, and I was going to say salam alaikum to her, and they pushed me. Don't say anything to her. Why? She's a Shia. She's a Shiite. You know, and they just turned their back. I mean, they're like at a wall and just turned their back on her. She was going the other way. And I remember just looking back, and she just looked so hurt, you know. And again, I'm just like, God, these people must really be awful, you know. But I felt bad as a human, you know, is what happened to her. Sure. So this is what I'm hearing. But everybody else is nice otherwise. Everybody's loving and community-oriented. I met a woman who I met on, I think, the Muslim Journal. She had just become Muslim, and she was writing for pen pals to learn more about Islam. So I started writing her. And we wrote back and forth for a year. And she finally said, I think I'm going to become a Shia. I've been reading Ayatollah Khomeini's stuff. So I sent her the pamphlet, the requisite pamphlet about Shia Islam, you know, how, no, you know, I said, no, you don't want to do that. And they read this. So she sent me back Tabat-Tabai Shia Islam. So I read that. And I said, this is not strange. This is no different than what I've been learning from these other things. So then questions started coming up with the history. And when I was a Sunni, I hate to say, I never did like Umar then. That whole rough, beat up your sister because she has a different thought, you know, throwing rocks at women. I just never liked him. And a lot of the brothers that I was seeing seemed to want to imitate that kind of concept of just being too brush. And they said, well, Umar. I said, but that Umar was rude if that's how he acted. That's not, I don't see, Muhammad didn't act like that way. So anyway, she sent me that book. And I didn't become Shia, but it did make it, okay, this is just as valid as everything else. And then after me and Tariq had divorced, I moved back home to Hawaii, and we met a Shia family, the Martins. And the first thing she told me, I want you to know I'm Shia. And I said, okay, because I guess she was used to getting people reacting if they found out later.
Background?
She African-American, her and her husband. In Hawaii, right. And she just, I just want you to know I'm Shia. And I'm like, and she said, okay, because I guess she was ready. I don't want to hear no mess. I don't, you know, she had heard it all going on. I just saw it now as a legitimate madhab, and I heard about Al-Azhar had accepted as a legitimate madhab back in the day. So I'm like, okay, these are just people just talking nonsense. These other folks that put these as a legitimate madhab. Yeah. And Nargis has also made the point. She said that if in Islam, if somebody's being accused of something, they have their day in court. You're supposed to be able to interview them. And she asked me, did you ever talk to a Shia? And I said, no. So what is this, gossip, fitna? So I had to say, okay, you're right, I can't continue to just repeat what I've heard. And so with Jahan and her husband, I got more questions answered and stuff like that. But I still wasn't really Shia yet. After I was living with my parents, I got remarried to another brother, and it was a very short marriage. It was just a mutual decision. It's like, hey, this is not fitting, so we just separated. You know, hindsight, it should have been a muta, but that's another show, I'm sure. He had said that I had the heart, a spirit of a Shia, because he was very eclectic. He knew all about, he'd been all around the world. He said, you know, you have a heart of a Shia. My cousin's like a Sufi, and it fits him. You see, you're more Shia. And I'm like, whatever, you know. So that was the first time. Then, after we decided to divorce, I started speaking to my current husband. In fact, the Martins in Hawaii had repeatedly tried to introduce us. Mm-hmm. You know, we talked on the phone a little bit. At that time, he wanted me to, you know, be more, wear the hijab, and I was still practicing that tough in terms of the dress and stuff. And we just, you know, I had just got out of divorce. I didn't want to hear it, you know, and he was just like, well, I need, you know. So we just remained friends. Then how did this go? Then I married Ishmael, and when I married Ishmael, he married Hasana, and they moved to California. Okay, so then I went back to my brother's in North Carolina, and then Ali called to see how I was doing. He had heard that my current husband, he had called to see, because he had heard from the Martins that me and the other brother divorced, and he was just calling because he was like, what the heck is going on? All these Muslims divorcing. So he was calling just to find out what happened. So to make a long story short, we just became friends. And so he started introducing Aql Bayt. He sent me Kitab al-Rashad, Najib Balaga, and I read it, you know, and it was like deep. I was like, whoa. And of course, in my Sunni training, still, it's embedded in there. I'm like, what difference does it make? It happened. It was obvious Allah's will. Why are we talking about this history stuff? Blah, 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 blah. And he said, okay, if I told you that exact same thing about African and African-American history, that it doesn't matter, that has nothing whatsoever to do with what's happening now, that you need to get over it, what would you say? I had to just shut up, because it's true. It does make a difference. There is something involved here. So that's kind of got me to really kind of focus on it, you know, and to start looking at it. And it was, during our courtship, we talked about 2 years on the phone. You know, it was clear. I said, this is the truth. You know, this is absolutely the truth, because I read, you know, then I was guided. Jahan and them, they were sending me stuff. I was meeting more Shias from the, yeah, this is in Hawaii. No, this is in North Carolina. There was no Shias, so I was still with the Sunnis. But I would bounce things off of them, and they didn't even know. You know, some of the historical points, they didn't, I have no idea. The scholar, I don't know what you're talking about. Then they got kind of wind that I was looking at Shiism, so they would make points like, when they're talking about history, it comes through this, 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 and they would look at me, and not through Prophet's family. And then they would go on with their speech. I'm like, which of course just makes you a little more stubborn, like, no, you're not going to tell me, you're not going to like, point me out in the middle of a speech. You know, so that did the opposite of what they were going to do. So mashallah, you know, with Ali just teaching me and showing me the stuff, then I, you know, accepted. I was coming to the South, and they had a lot of issues. They just had a lot of issues. But I, you know, I had like 2 or 3 really, really good friends, but I was seen as kind of an interloper, which unfortunately, and I had heard this before, but I think single women in some communities, it was just, they were, because Ali was already married, and we were already talking about polygyny, and I never had a problem with polygyny. And he was saying his wife didn't have polygyny, and I'm like, get out of here. So, you know, I'm talking to her, I'm talking to him. So I'm telling everybody what I'm learning. Wow, look at how neat this is, da, 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 da. And so they're taking that as maybe, does that mean that I want to marry their husbands? They weren't aware that I was talking to Ali. So all this rumors are going around about me calling up women's husbands, asking them to marry me behind their backs. And this was going on for months, and I couldn't figure out why these sisters just acting like this. And finally somebody got mad at somebody else, called me, because now I could, you know, well, you know what so-and-so was saying about you. Come to find out the whole community was, not the whole. So they had a meeting, and which is, alhamdulillah, they got together, so, okay, this is a bunch of fitna, we need to have a meeting and work this out. So most of them apologized. He said, well, do you have something to say? And I said, no. I said, why would you think that? You know, especially if I remember correctly, what you used to tell me, you don't want your husband. So what difference would it make if I did want your husband? I mean, you were talking to me all this stuff about how you disliked you. So, you know, just the fitna. And that was solved, alhamdulillah. They really came together nicely for that. But that's basically it. They, you know, okay, see, into the Shia thing. Most of them didn't know. I just cleared up what we didn't believe based on, okay, what do you think we believe? No, we don't believe that. We do not pee in our tea. You know, we do this kind of stuff. So it was okay. They didn't really ostracize me. They didn't. I was kind of already ostracized by that time based on this fitna. Sure. Yeah. I've met some really lifelong friends. And it's two sides to it. On one side, I find the Shias are more cliquish and separate than the Sunnis were. You got your, you know, Pakistani mouth, and it goes on like that. But on the other hand, the depth, when you do get the friendships, the depths are really, really, really close. I mean, closer than I've ever been with anybody else. When we moved in, the Muslims from, I mean, the Iraqi Shias were coming refugees, so they were new. And they just, it was a lot of stuff that went on there, because a lot of them were very ignorant. And I mean, the women, they'd never been to school, they'd never been out the country, they didn't want to be in America. So the center was kind of created to help them have a home away from home. We understood that. But I kind of went in there and met all the sisters I could. They ran away a lot of other people. A lot of the Iranis moved up north because it was just a little cultural clash with the Afghanis, and just a lot of stuff that went on. So then the Irani and the Afghanis kind of started a Farsi-speaking place up here, which they usually do things in English more often than at the other one, which now is almost all Arabic. But at that time, before we had the groups, a group of sisters would meet. We went to each other's house every month. We'd have a potluck. We just, everybody, Afghanis, because I was trying to duplicate what I did with the Sunnis, what we were doing with the Sunnis, and it really worked. So in that course, 20 years ago, there's a core of us OG ladies now that are really, really close. And the kids that were 12, they're grown, 20, 30 married. So, but the ones now, my children, my nieces and nephews, they really don't have a relationship except maybe one or two families or the friends of those families, because it's not conducive to them. It's really not conducive to even the children of the immigrants, because the programs don't take into account what they're dealing with in America. It's just trying to set up the same program that they had back home in the same language or the same paradigm, and the kids go and they're bored. I don't even think they're thinking in the language anymore. They understand a lot of it conversely, but when a scholar comes and speaks it, you know, it's just not relating to them. So it's kind of like that now. But you do with what you can and who you can, and do what you can. I personally, with my background and my interest, I don't have a problem going in. I'll be the one to bust the bubble, because I know sometimes they're just shy. Who are you? Are you a spy? What are you doing here? I'll go in and introduce myself, shake my hand, and get, you know, just sit right next to them and start talking. And then meet key people, and once you know one person, oh, this is my friend, and then it's more accepting. I think that's just kind of an old school. It's not old school. I think everybody does that. I don't have a problem, but a lot of my family members don't, and a lot of, interestingly, the white converts, because they have. I've seen it. I've heard it. People tend to accept more the African American converts easier, because you know we have Muhammad Ali, we have this, we have, you know, and it's kind of cool, I guess. But the white converts, they're almost, it's like a love-hate relationship, you know. The white skin is cherished, but you're white, you know, you're American, and you're only this because you're married to so-and-so. And they'll give us salams and won't give them salams. They'll give them, and they'll give salam, and they won't salam back. And so a lot of our, one sister still comes, because her husband's really big on it, but a couple of them, they just refuse to come out anymore. They will not. They will go to the Sunni masjids, and they will not go back out with the Shias. We're done. So they're calling for an American center. And I don't, in fact, one of the alims said the same thing. I don't think he was saying it in terms of like, you know, you black people need to have your own space, but that he knew realistically what it would be. He said you need to have an American center. And we were insulted at first, but now I can see that that might be what has to happen, because in the meantime, our kids are growing up and not getting this. We can't wait 20, 30 years for this to evolve.